Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you because we were just talking offline about I'm sort of on this money kick. Financial insecurity is something that really plagues people in recovery. And I think it has really deep roots. It affects our relationships, it's tied to our self-esteem and our self-worth. And I think people coming into sobriety already sort of have a few strikes against them because, addiction does kind of break down your self-worth, your self-esteem, and for a lot of people it damages the bank account too. So we're going to get into your story and your expertise around mindset around money, maybe some of the emotional, mental components to that, and maybe we'll even throw in a little bit of tactical, practical things that people can do. But before we jump in, I like to play a little game called the lightning round, which is actually very slow. Um, when you first got sober, were there any books that helped you early on?
Yeah. I read all the books, so I
Did you?
could. I think the one that was most powerful. There was a couple of them that were most powerful for me. Alcohol Explained by William Porter. I found useful. The Biology of Desire was the one that put it all together for me. And
Okay.
there are a bunch of others as well, but the Biology of Desire was explained how addiction hijacks the dopamine system essentially, and it just made everything clearer for me. And essentially it just gave me patience through the process because it
Oh,
explained how the sort of healing process, the process of neuroplasticity, takes months and months. And so just knowing that just it kind of relaxed me and just said, yeah, okay, it's going to be fine, you've just got to wait it out.
just got to wait it out. Yeah, I feel like self-compassion and patience are so desperately needed in the beginning because we want to feel better quickly, right? And
Mm,
we're going to talk about some things that will help people feel better quickly in different areas. But yeah, the biology of desire is so important there's something about understanding the mechanics and the science behind it that sort of
yes,
depersonalizes it.
yes.
And when it's depersonalized, it's like, oh, everybody's like this and there's a way out. So that's always super helpful.
Well, the biggest the thing that I was worried about was, have I permanently damaged myself? Have I permanent Because I had two big health scares, which were my prompt, and I was like, I don't know if there's a way back from this. And the Biology of Desire explained the healing process. It explained neuroplasticity. It explained how the brain rewires itself, but it said you've got to give it a year.
A year. Oh, it's so nice to actually thank you for bringing that up. I think that that is a fear that people have very in the beginning of have I done permanent damage? And
Mm,
yeah, that's very hopeful to hear that, yeah, we can heal from a lot of this. Um, Over the last, few years that you've been sober, is there any idea like a mantra or quote that you have kind of hung on to that has kind of kept you coming back to this idea of committing to your sobriety?
Well, honestly, it might be one day at a time. I mean, I hate to sort of, uh,
Yay!
sort of play back your message, but the thing that is my sort of North Star, I keep a health diary,
Oh,
and every day I just, I fill in various things about, the inputs and the outputs, and but I always each day record like what number is today. And I kind of know that if I fill in my health diary and I do the things that I know I'm supposed to do, and if I stick to that, I know I'm going to be okay.
yeah, I love that. I love that you share that you're recording the days you're at day 970. And I remember going to meetings occasionally or talking to people. It's like, oh, how long have you been sober? And they don't know, which always makes me really worried. Because if you don't really kind of know where you're at, Like, I don't know, to me, I think if you're counting days, it's a priority for you.
Mm. Well, it's that's it. I mean, there's lots of things in my life that I kind of should do, but I know that um, this is the most important thing. Like, if you've got to a place where alcohol has really dragged you down, it is the most important thing, bar none. And so I know that if I do my health diary and I just keep that number ticking up every day, I know everything else is fixable.
Oh, yeah, everything else is fixable. Um, I understand that like counting days can be controversial for some people, especially if there's a chronic relapse component. So I just want to throw it out there for people that are listening. This is sort of like a take what you like, leave the rest podcast in case in case anyone was wondering.
I mean, I'll give you a different one. My other mantra is this too shall pass. And so, the classical story is that Alexander the Great had, a ring made up. And the idea was that, no matter how bad you're feeling, it's like clouds in the sky, they blow over the sun and everything goes grey and dark. And then they blow past the sun, and the moments, your spirits are lifted, and everything looks very different. And just that mantra of this too shall pass, has kind of got me through a lot of sort of bad times. And I don't leave it to chance to remind myself of that. So, I actually had a bracelet kind of made up with, this too shall pass. So it's just always there. It's a constant reminder for me. And so I'm all about these, just if you can just find these little hacks, little reminders, little ways to like pop yourself back into your frame.
Yeah.
Um, that's a kind of useful like tactic. So that in itself won't do it, but if you've got like enough little tools like that, then you should be good.
Yeah, that's a really big one. This too shall pass. That one is really powerful. It's a genius to put it on a bracelet, right? Something that you have at the end of your hand. I have occasionally put things like that on my cell phone as the backdrop or the screensaver, so that I,
Yes.
yeah, so that's a great idea. Put it somewhere where you can be reminded of it frequently. That's
Yeah, I mean, I
brilliant.
actually had you couldn't have just one made up, so I had like 100 made up, and I hand them to clients now.
Do you
So
really?
I just give them to my clients, and some people are like, okay, why is this guy giving me this? And they'd probably throw it in the bin, but others are like, oh, that was just super, super useful.
Yeah, that's not interesting. You got to give it away to keep it, as they say. So, what a beautiful, whatever you put out, you get back tenfold. So, love these little reminders. Um, is there one thing you wish you would have known when you first got sober that you know now?
So what I wish I'd known earlier is that because the thing that I didn't quit till I was 52. Okay. And the reason it took me so long is I tried moderation a zillion times, couldn't moderate. Um, Alcohol was my biggest reward, my biggest treat, the thing I kind of looked forward to. And so it was kind of intolerable for me, the idea of a life where like I'm never going to drink again. And so um, that that framing was just like that was the problem for me. And what I wish I'd known is that all you've got to do, you don't have to like white knuckle it forever. You just have to get through 3 months, and then you've forgotten about the thing. And so if someone had just said like you're just bridging a 3 month gap, that's all you've got to do. You've only got to do 3 months. It's not forever. It's just for
Brilliant.
3 months.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
that's
brilliant. Yeah, it's not forever. It's not gonna stop forever.
So I guess
No.
I needed someone to lie to me and say it's not forever, and it is forever, but like it doesn't. Once you've done the 3 months, the cravings just go, and it's okay. It's kind of easy.
Yeah, it's sort of like have you ever like divorced yourself from like a toxic friend where Once you get a
Yeah.
little bit of space, you're like, wow, why was I so enmeshed in that relationship to begin with? Like if
Mm,
booze is like a toxic friend that once you get a break from it, you're like, wow, why was I hanging on to it for so long?
yes, 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 yeah, and and the other reframe um that was just super useful for me is like alcohol is poison. And once I'd kind of like got that reframe internalized, it's like, well, why would I hang on to poison? Just as you say, why would you hang on to a toxic friend? Or why would I keep pouring poison down me? The visual that just really nailed that for me was I just remember seeing um like a bioethanol gas pump where you go and fill up your car and you put ethanol bioethanol in your gas tank. It's like, hold on, I wouldn't drink petrol. Like I just wouldn't go to a gas station and drink petrol, but I am drinking this thing that they're fueling cars with. It's kind of wild.
It really is. I mean, we have been so brainwashed into thinking that it's okay, it's acceptable. But yeah, it's total insanity. Like I was just writing about this the other day, this idea that alcohol is a neurotoxin and it affects the one organ that determines every aspect of our life. Like it affects your brain, and we're
Yeah.
compromising our brains, and we are so dependent on our brains for decision making and processing. And I mean, why are we doing this? Like, why is this okay? This just doesn't make any sense.
To me, it's just crazy when you think about what alcohol is used for. One, it's used as like as a petrol substitute, and the other
Right.
thing is like disinfecting scalpels and hospital and like killing bugs. It's a bug killer. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so I'm dousing my brain in bug killer.
Yeah, like does you put it like that, it just doesn't make any sense. Oh my gosh.
And
Um,
the neurotoxin point, you do know, or I noticed as the months tick by, I'm like, I'm just thinking a little clearer. I'm thinking a little quicker. I've got access to a slightly better vocabulary. It's like it's just working a little better.
oh, funny. Yeah, you like your recall and memory and all that
Yes.
stuff is working better. Yeah, it's kind of funny, you don't experience this as a woman, but as we get older, like brain fog is a real thing. And women that are
Right.
sort of going through hormonal changes, it is like we need every advantage that we can get. So, yeah, a brain free of a neurotoxin, that's a bonus for sure. Um, well, I'm so curious. I want to make sure that we have enough time to kind of dig into your expertise, but can we start with a little bit of your history? I'm always so curious, like what family life was like growing up, if there was like trauma and you don't have to like tell me the worst thing that ever happened to you, but it's just interesting how childhood sort of sets the stage for the rest of our lives. And you've been sober for a while, which requires a lot of self-examination and but what was life like for you in your younger days?
So very solid, sort of stable, kind of ordinary middle class background. My parents stayed together the whole time. They're still together to this day. Um, and my mum was a teacher, an English teacher. My dad worked as a sort of middle manager for a construction company. So yeah, that was very solid background. No real no trauma, but I have kind of I've done some therapy on myself, and when we were when I was 11 in 1981, my parents bought a bigger house, and they kind of did the classic, ambitious sort of middle class thing of, buy the biggest house that you can afford, borrow as much from the bank as the bank will lend you. Um, and unfortunately, in 1981, um, there was a recession and interest rates went to 17%. And we don't have fixed rate mortgages in the UK. It varies with the interest rate. So
Still today, it's like that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Oh, wow.
you can't borrow a 30-year mortgage in the UK. So you have to fix it for 5 years, and then it resets. And
Every
so
5 years?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, that's alarming, but go ahead.
So
Continue.
if you imagine how screwed a lot of the economy and a lot of the population would be today if interest rates went to 17%,
Oh
right?
my goodness.
But that happened in 1981, and my dad actually he worked in construction, and construction was like had a real downturn at the same
Mm.
time. So at the same time that he's worried about losing his job, um, the mortgage payments go through the roof. So what happens? Just my parents tightened their belt. So the newspaper got cancelled. My dad stopped brewing his own beer. They bought this house, and for a they couldn't we didn't have floorboards for a while, so they had these sort of beams that you had to walk on and not if and be careful you didn't fall down into the black abyss below. um, because it was an old house and my dad was doing a lot of the work himself,
Oh,
and he was saving
yeah.
money on builders, and he couldn't afford to like buy the stuff as soon as he wanted to buy the stuff. So we kind of lived in a building site and economized, and didn't go on holiday that year, and then like from that point on for a while there was a lot of camping holidays and rather than anything flashier than that. And it was no big deal. With hindsight they got through it, but I picked up a lot of anxiety, particularly from my mother. My mother was very anxious, um, and she transmitted some of that anxiety to me, I think, or I picked up on it. um, and that stayed with me. And I got very clear in my own head that if you owe too much money to the bank, it's a problem. It's kind of scary, and ultimately the bank can take the house away from you. And so ever since then, I've had this irrational like terror of being homeless, poor, homeless, out on the street. Um, and that just informed so much of my subsequent life, so many of my choices. I kind of engineered my entire life from that point onwards to avoid being homeless. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
talk about an overreaction, right? Um, so when I chose like a degree to study, I did economics, not because I wanted to do economics, but it's like that's the gateway into finance, and I've got to get into finance because finance is where the money is. And this was back in the late 80s, and there were stockbrokers, and there were mobile phones, and there were Porsches, and I'm like stuck in the middle of nowhere in provincial England, like terrified of poverty. And I'm looking at the TV and I'm seeing Porsches and Wall Street and mobile phones. And I'm like, I want that. And so because they're not poor, or I thought they weren't poor. So I'm like, I want to do that. So I did an economics degree, and then tried to get a job in an investment bank when I graduated, but I couldn't. So I trained as a chartered accountant in London, did 3 years of that, and then I got into investment banking. And then I worked in the city for 20 years, and just binge worked, was a workaholic, climbed the ladder. Everything went well in a sort of narrow career sense and an income sense. Um, but um, but all the time I was just very conscious that I am doing this for the money. And so as we kind of touched on, that eventually ended up taking a big toll on me.
Yeah. It's so interesting because, you and I have sort of a similar background in the sense that, workaholism, sell your soul to get the job that makes all the money. And, when I was doing it, I was in so from Silicon Valley doing tech sales. And it's a huge drinking culture, right? But I was already sober. But what I saw from some of my colleagues is that they really used the drinking culture as a bonding experience, either with colleagues or clients. And I wonder if the drinking in your career sort of played that role in your life.
100%. So, I'm just wired to be an introvert. So, alcohol helps me, it helped me relax. It helped me bond with people that I didn't know that well. It kind of took the edge off. Um, so, no question at all that alcohol helped me with that. Um, it was it was a way of celebrating your wins.
Mm.
It was so, all I worked in mergers and acquisitions, and if you once you've done a
Mm.
deal, you go out and everyone gets drunk. And so that was a ritual, that was a reward, that was a sort of lifestyle. And then as I got more senior, there was business development, there was client entertaining, I had an expense account, I could take people out, and I was paid to go drinking.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
I was kind of so in the latter part of my career, I could just take anyone to any restaurant in London and actually the only question I'd get asked is why aren't you spending more on entertaining? So no, there was
Wow.
no problem with that. And a lot of those, I mean, a lot of those people that I was taking out, I mean, it wasn't that they were bad people, but I didn't really want to be doing it. It's some part of me didn't want to be there, and
Yeah.
the alcohol meant that I'm physically there, but mentally I'm kind of somewhere else.
Yeah.
Um, and so I definitely used alcohol to like mask to as a social lubricant. I definitely used it to avoid like the kind of pain that I was feeling like deep inside. Um, I felt a lot of pressure on me because me and my wife, we had three children, and so I was the sole breadwinner for a big chunk of that time. And I was absolutely obsessed with making sure that the children didn't ever feel that fear of being homeless.
Yeah.
So I was so driven to earn and just stash the money and kind of de pay off the mortgage and de-risk my financial situation because I just didn't want the kids to like make the same mistake I had and just spend most of your life terrified of being homeless. So,
Yeah, it's so
there's
interesting that sorry to interrupt you, but it's so interesting that, whatever we, struggle with in childhood, we try to do everything that we can to prevent that for our kids.
yeah. And look, if I'm being honest, I overreacted. I let the pendulum went
Yeah.
too far the other way.
Yeah.
So it there's no question that the childhood experience informed me. But it's like maybe I learned too much from that childhood experience.
Yeah, doesn't it make you like I had a lot of that too as a child, the financial insecurity. And, I did the same thing. I went the other way, workaholism, still fighting that today. It's better, but
I,
just this.
can I?
Yeah, go
Sorry, carry
ahead.
on.
No, you
I,
go.
I, I I'll tell you another sort of you asked about your background and what something really interesting happened to me when I was older. I realized that my parents' relationship with alcohol had deeply, deeply, deeply influenced me in all sorts of ways that I didn't understand. So when I drank from the age of 17 to 52, and
17, you start. That's normal though, where you were, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
everybody's
yeah,
drinking at the pub at 17.
absolutely, yeah. It's kind of rite of passage,
Yeah.
get a fake
Yeah.
ID, student ID, go to the pub, stand on tiptoes at the bar, and hope you hope you get served.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember going, but during that time, the alcohol cravings were always kind of the most severe, um, like in the evening before supper, before dinner, like I don't know, sort of 6 o'clock-ish. I never really knew why that was the case, but one day when as an adult, I'm back at my parents' house, and it's a Saturday afternoon. I'd been there for a while, and um, my parents have this grandfather clock, and at 6 o'clock, the clock struck six, goes dong dong, and my dad like hears that, and he jumps up and he's like, right, who wants a drink? And I'm like, oh, that's where it's from.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
that's my upbringing. Like for all those years from my upbringing, my dad had some sort of mental rule that you're not allowed to drink until 6 o'clock, but then it's like go time. And I was always wondered why the cravings hit me hardest at 6 p.m. And there's your answer.
So even at your parents' house, you're, is this when you were an adult? Your dad was like, "Hey, do you want to
Yes.
drink?" Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Did he always do that when you were growing up?
So yeah, but but
Always, yeah.
he wasn't offering me an alcoholic drink,
Yeah.
but that's he that was his routine, that was his habit, and I just hadn't ever noticed it, or hadn't really given it
Yeah.
any thought.
Like so after you got sober, you started making all these connections about
Exactly.
why this is what we do, right? We go, why am I the way I am? And then you
Why as
reflect
I am
back
I
to
am.
child. Yeah, it's like conditioning. It's conditioning. It's, the anxiety is present, maybe from your mom, hard times, people get stressed
Yep.
out. And then your dad having these rules about like not drinking before six, but once 6 o'clock hits, as you said, it's game on, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the difference in his, um, attitude, like being super happy about that, or like it's, oh, finally it's a relief or something to look forward to.
And the one of the problems, it sounds really weird to like bitch and moan about your parents, but like one of the problems was they always were good at moderation. And so my
Oh,
what I observed are was two people that were able to drink and stop, and I never ever saw them lose control. And
okay.
so I don't have any like sort of awful trauma stories about, when my dad got drunk and did something, he said, did nothing like that at all. Unfortunately, the message that I took from that is that alcohol is very benign and very
Mm.
and controllable, and it's possible to moderate. Um, and it is possible for lots of people to moderate. It's possible for my parents to moderate. For me, not so much.
Yes, I ran that experiment as well. Failed miserably. Yeah, I think that's a very difficult realization to come to, is that some people can and I cannot. That
Mm.
is a very bitter pill to swallow for sure.
Well, it is when you're the guy or the gal that I do things, I achieve things. I'm not the weak person. I can do the thing. And it's like, I can do the thing, but the thing, that sort of grit and determination when it's applied to drinking it's like, that's the reason I can't moderate. I can't seem to moderate.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's such a bummer. When you realize, like, I'm not that person, not for lack of trying. Yeah, I think it's very confusing when you're really successful in some areas and when you just can't seem to control, like, not being able to moderate is baffling on so many levels.
Mm. Yes.
It's
Yes.
baffling. Why can I
Well,
not moderate?
Well, you absolutely nailed it. It is conditioning, and it's like Pavlov's dog. The Pavlov's dog experiment. He rings the bell, and the saliva appear. The dogs make saliva without the production of food because they've been trained to associate the bell with the production of food. So that is Pavlovian conditioning, and that is what's going on. And it's really hard to fight the lizard brain.
Yeah, it's conditioning. What's interesting is the sort of next conclusion is that if we can be conditioned into it, we can be conditioned out of it. And
Mm.
I'm gonna put a sort of a pin in that because we're gonna come back to that later. What was it that was it something that happened that you were like, I just can't like I can't moderate? You have consequences in your life that you don't want. What was it that finally helped you to decide I'm gonna quit?
Mm. Well, tried moderation a ton of times, and um, I'm kind of a little embarrassed to say, like because it wasn't, I never sort of found like the answer within me. Essentially, I had like a health scare, and that was my wake up call. And
Health
it
scare.
was
Yeah.
it was the health scare that just jolted me out of it. And essentially, it's like I came to a fork in the road, and like left is life and right is kind of death, or the path to death. And it's like, okay, well, now I've kind of got no choice. So
Mm.
what happened for me sometime after COVID, or around sort of slash after the COVID, I mean, I actually had two health scares. So one was I had a condition called Barrett's esophagus, where you have a sort of an abnormality or an inflammation of the lining of the esophagus that goes from your sort of mouth to your stomach. And I ended up going to have an endoscopy where they kind of put a tube with a camera down the back of your throat and down the
Oh, brutal.
esophagus, and it is brutal. Like you like the gag reflex is horrible. and and essentially the sort of prognosis was, okay, you've got this condition, it's not that bad, but by the way, your chance of that developing into esophageal cancer is
Uh,
about like 33% or whatever, if you carry on whatever you're doing. And I was like, okay, what are the causes of that? Okay, it's alcohol and some other
right.
stuff, but like it was basically alcohol. So that was wake up call number one. And then wake up call number two was, and I can't remember which came first, but the other thing that happened around about the same time is I just completely lost my in all interest in sex, just lost my libido completely. And like that sucks. So I just like hit the internet, did did as much googling as one can do, watched all the Huberman Lab podcasts,
Yeah.
read
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
books, and actually that's what took me ultimately to the biology of desire, and
Hmm.
it explained it for me.
Yeah.
And so the way it explained it for me is, in that book, addiction is defined as a progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure.
Yeah. That's
Um,
a Huberman thing, huh?
where he got it off the biology,
Oh
he got
yeah,
it
yeah.
off Mark Lewis. He stole that.
Mark Lewis. Okay, we'll credit Mark Lewis. Love them both though.
um, and um, and Mark Lewis is like Huberman. They're both neuroscientists. I mean,
Uh,
Mark Lewis is a super interesting guy because A, he's a professor of neuroscience, but B, in his youth, he was a heroin addict.
oh,
And like, there's plenty of heroin addicts in this world. There's plenty of neuroscience professors in this world. There's not many people that have been both.
yeah.
So Mark Lewis just really understands the neuroscience of addiction, not alcohol addiction specifically, but all addictions have a kind of
Sure.
similar
Yeah.
mechanism.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and he just understands it, A, through his research and his work, but also through his kind of lived experience as a heroin addict.
Yes,
And
it gives you a
like,
bit of credibility if you have lived
yeah.
experience.
And so, I mean, what all heroin addicts lose? They lose interest in sex, they lose their libido, and they also tend to lose their job. and they lose interest in in their job, they lose interest in their family, they lose
Yeah.
interest in everything that isn't the hit, that isn't their source of
Yeah.
dopamine.
Yeah.
And it is a wiring of the dopamine system over time just to get your dopamine from the substance of abuse, and you just don't get it from anything else anymore.
Yeah.
And once I understood that, it's like, okay, I this is kind of mildly terrifying. I don't know if this is reversible. And then then like we were talking earlier, the book explained you got to be patient, but give it a few months, and the healing, the cravings will fade, and like your system heals and resets.
Yeah. Did you cure your libido issue?
Yep, it just takes time.
Yeah, I ask that in all seriousness because that is something that, women suffer with in menopause. And we don't talk about it enough because if you're in a relationship, it causes huge problems. Right. And so
Yeah.
I would imagine, being married with kids and stuff, I would imagine that, any kind of addiction, it has a multitude of consequences. And workaholism tends to take all your mental faculties and like it's an obsession. Right. So addiction, workaholism, all this stuff. It's very extreme, out of balance, and so. But I think it's interesting what you mentioned, the health scares. There is this phenomenon of post-traumatic growth, right? And that's
Mm.
what I see a lot in like people that are recovering. A lot of times people talk about rock bottom. That is an experience of post-traumatic growth, but health scares can absolutely. I had an uncle that never did 12 step and he was definitely an alcoholic. He used to hide bottles in his golf bag and did all this crazy stuff. And then he had a heart attack and then he was sober after that. I think he did a stint in treatment, but then nothing after that. Like he didn't go to 12 step. But what you're describing is a, post-traumatic, that is a traumatic, those are traumatic events. And
Mm.
so you had lots of consequences. So you just got sober after that? Like, did you start incorporating other practices to sort of take the place of everything that alcohol was bringing you?
Um, yeah, so the health stuff was my absolute wake up call. I mean, I resisted what was right in front of me for a long time. So I hired a health coach.
Oh, nice.
Um, Sorry, I didn't hire a health coach. I spoke to a health coach and said, I've lost my libido. What do you think it is? And and it was he just said, well, it's pretty obviously it's your drinking. And he told me that in the first time I spoke to him. I'm like, well, I'm not hiring this guy because he's given me the wrong answer. I was like, I
You're
want,
gonna go answer shopping. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I was looking for the answer that allowed me to carry on drinking.
Never mind
So
the
you,
esophageal cancer thing. That's also not relevant.
so I resisted that truth for a long time, and that's why I didn't I didn't stop till I was 52, but I stopped immediately when I realized that it's a straight it's like people sort of like people say you can have sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I'm like, well, I can't have all three. I'm gonna have to choose.
Yeah, keep the drugs.
You can have you can have two of them, but you can't have all
Drugs
three.
and rock and roll, it is. Someone's priorities are messed up.
So I was like, okay, well, as soon as I understood that linkage, which I kind of credit to the biology of desire,
Mhm.
which laid it out so clearly. As soon as I understood that, okay, well, there's my motivation.
There it is. Yeah. And you've been sober ever since. That's amazing. Um, I want to transition. We made these promises that we're going to talk about money, you know, and I just so related to this idea of like financial insecurity in childhood. I definitely had that. And where my mind went to is the extreme is money is security. Money
Mm,
is my answer. Money is my, I
mm,
made money my higher power. right? And for, many years of my professional career, I I felt like I sold my soul in some ways because
Yeah.
I was willing to suffer the stress of certain kinds of work. Tech sales is super stress. I was an account executive and in the
Yeah.
enterprise level, I did inside sales. Super stressful, right? Talking to people about things I didn't really care about for the sake of money. So, and ultimately, it was sort of like a self-betrayal. And I'm so now, and people have a lot of financial insecurity when they get sober. And so, what are some of the mindset shifts that, or the reframes, or how do people identify like what is really going on with their relationship with money? And how do we begin to heal that? And you can answer that in any way that makes sense.
With some context, I did so I did my career. I was super focused on so I was earning good money and I was getting promoted, but instead of doing the classic sort of city thing, Wall Street thing, where your lifestyle inflates up with your salary, I basically held down the spending, and banked the difference and invested the difference in the stock market and just stash, 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 stash. So long story short, I paid my mortgage off when I was 32 and haven't had any debt since I was 32. And when I was 43, I was like, okay, I've run my numbers. I don't need to work now. I can stop. I could like, I couldn't have a private jet or anything, but I could just go and like have a nice, quiet little life. And as long as I don't spend too much, I don't have to work again. Um, and so I did that. And I mean, I needed something to do. So I started doing coaching. I started doing financial coaching and I started all around the area of financial independence, and kind of how you dig your way out of the prison camp, as I call it. How do you chip your way out of debt or out of the situation where you have to do the high paying job to keep the show on the road. And the more clients that I spoke to, the clearer the pattern became, which was I was just talking to a lot of people who objectively had enough, but they still felt the fear. They still
Mm,
felt that financial anxiety. And I mean, and I felt it myself. So it wasn't just them; it was me too. But the process of coaching other people, in some way helped me a lot because I'm realizing that um, financial anxiety just it for some people it never goes away. So
yeah.
there are many different ways to approach the problem, and there's many different things you can do to mitigate it. But I do think that if you're kind of wired a certain way or you had a certain childhood experience, you'll always be prone to that or at risk of lapsing back into that. And so, what's the most obvious thing that one can do is, get your finances sorted out and,
Yeah.
stop, don't waste money, cut the Netflix subscription that you don't use or the gym subscription that you don't use. Don't buy the new BMW on finance, like all the basic obvious like stuff so you can kind of cut out the waste and you can um invest your money. But what I realized is that for some people that's just not enough. So some
Yeah.
people are actually going to have to create a toolkit for financial anxiety. And the toolkit includes health, biochemistry, hormonal optimization. As a guy, for example, if you're very low in testosterone and you're very low in high in prolactin, low in baseline dopamine, you're just going to naturally feel more anxious. And so part of what I mean, I do sort of, I promise I do serious financial coaching, but for some clients, I'll say that they're like, I'm worried about money. And I'm like, okay, you should have a hormone test. Go get a blood panel and we'll talk about your blood panel results.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that you say that you're like, I promise I do serious financial advice. But to me, it's the emotional component that
Mm,
actually influences, like I feel like that is the most important thing, like the horm like bi
mm,
biology, and then it's like mental mindset too. So that's
mm,
actually brilliant that you address, how is your health? Because the
mm,
hormones determine, dopamine is actually related to motivation.
mm.
And I think testosterone is related to drive. I could be wrong. I'm
Yes,
not sure.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. No,
Uh,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, because these are things that actually influence our feelings and our decision-making capabilities. So I think that's brilliant that you address that.
So it kind of sets our mojo and our wellness. So I mean, when I'm talking to a new client, one of the things I'll always ask them, so they'll be talking about sort of financially saving stuff, and I will typically ask them, okay, but before we get into that, just on a scale of like 1 to 10, how is your energy, wellness, mojo, joie de vivre, call it what you like? How would you rank that today? Because often the answer is, oh, I'm like a 2 or a 3 or a 4. And
Wow.
if you're a 2 or 3 or 4, it does, you could have $1 billion in the bank. You're still going to feel anxiety.
Oh, and people tie that to money.
Yeah. So
Like
um,
money is
uh,
the solution.
people think money is the solution, but it's not the solution. So for me, whenever I get anxious, it manifests as financial anxiety. So, for example, let's say I've read on the news that the zombie apocalypse is coming. The way I'll process that, other people be like, I'm worried about being killed by the zombies. I'll think, oh, I wonder if I'll be able to afford enough ammunition for my shotgun in the zombie apocalypse. So, like everything, like manifests as financial anxiety for me,
Yeah.
and so I have to realize that I'm just wired a certain way that if I'm feeling anxiety for whatever reason, it for me it will manifest as financial anxiety.
Gosh, that is such a really important awareness to have about yourself.
And so once you have that awareness about yourself, you collect a toolkit. And so I talked to you about like the band that says this too shall pass. There's little hacks like that. There's all sorts of ways to change your emotional and physiological state quickly and reliably without alcohol. And
Yeah.
so, like, if you just go, I mean, if I'm feeling anxiety and I went to the park and I ran 5 100-meter sprints, I will reliably, I mean, I may feel awful after that, like I'm kind of gonna die or something, but I will not be feeling anxious. I'll be like, I may be
Yeah.
puking my guts up, but I'm not anxious anymore, you know. Um, and
It's
so
all a trade-off.
you can absolutely use exercise to quickly and
Hmm.
reliably change your physiological state. You can use cold water exposure, ice baths.
Oh, yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful and incredibly quick and incredibly reliable, and it works every time.
Can I
Um,
just tell you that we ended up investing in a cold plunge tub thing that's like regulated. It's got and that sucker gets cold. But what I understand is that if you can, and listen, I could do like 3 minutes. My husband's like a champ. He can do like 10 minutes or whatever. But it increases your adrenal. Is it your adrenaline for like the rest of the day? Like it does change your adrenaline physiologically for hours after.
so 200% elevation in dopamine, and dopamine converts into adrenaline. And so
Oh,
essentially what your body does when it gets into cold water says, um, this is kind of emergency. We need to dial up the thermostat. We need to dial up
oh,
the metabolism. We need to like and that is modulated by dopamine and converting to adrenaline. So you get that kind of your metabolic rate kicks up, and so you feel that that lasts for hours. I mean, that will last most of the rest of the day. So you get a kind of hour lot, several hours of like a sort of afterglow from the adrenaline. It also has a longer term testosterone boosting effect. Certainly in men, I don't know about women so much, but certainly for men. And so, yeah, ice baths have all sorts of kind of powerful effects. So they help um, mitigate insulin resistance. They improve your
Mhm.
kind of ability to process glucose, so that they're kind of anti-diabetic. Um, so there's lots of ways that they're good for mitochondrial like biogenesis, like creating new mitochondria. So there's all sorts of interesting things that cold baths do, but in some ways one of them is just like it's just really good as like do something that's out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, Huberman was talking about this with David Goggins on a podcast where if you do something that's really hard, it like develops something in your anterior singular cortex that's like when we do something hard, it creates resiliency. So I really love this idea of like doing hard things that are good for you because it has a conversely beneficial. These are great, like health, like physical, like biological things to have in your toolkit. When it comes to money, I remember, this overwhelming fear I had of just like looking at my money,
Mm.
like just looking at it. And what are some of the you see a lot of patterns with people. So, what are sort of some of the patterns? Like, if people are afraid to look at their money, how do you help them, confront reality and get real honest about the existing situation?
So a, a really good test, a really good exercise, in the early stages is just do a total kind of self-honesty thing where for a month, it might be a month, might be 3 months, where you just track every like dollar you spend, every penny you spend. And so it's actually not that hard to do that. If you spend from one bank account, you can just download the transactions into a spreadsheet very quickly and easily, and you can see it all listed. So and at that point you are lifting up the carpet and looking at the thing that you hid under the carpet, looking at the sort of pile of dirt under the carpet. And so that is a sort of radical honesty, an exercise in for some people in radical honesty. So some people need to be coaxed or coached to do that.
Like, just get
Um,
some support.
Yes. And some people kind of know that they need to do that, but some people won't do it for themselves, won't do it by themselves. Some people find that easier to do when someone like me is going to shout shout at them if they don't, or at least sort of roll their eyes and tease them. So there's the sort of what gets measured gets managed, radical honesty, track your spending, no blame, no shame, just like, let's know where it's all going. Like, where does it all go? Because for a lot of people, they'll go through life and money is leaking out of their bucket, like leaking out of their life like a bucket shot full of holes, so that,
Yeah.
that every month they tip a bunch more money in, but it's just gushing out the bottom. So, you know, canceling the Netflix they don't use or the gym membership they don't use, those are sort of plugging the obvious leaks.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of like triage. You know, in terms of more sustainably and going forward, really, the idea is to set it and forget it, automate where possible, and just have have everything kind of run on automatic pilot. So, a good portfolio setup, a good personal finance setup, um, should pass the coma test. In other words, if I go into slip into a coma for 3 months, when I wake up, my utility bills have still been paid by direct debit. and the rent got paid or the mortgage got paid um, by direct debit, and like my stock investments just were gently compounding and the dividends were being reinvested by themselves. And so I emerged from my coma, and it's all good in the hood. And so that just takes a bit of an upfront sort of exercise to get it on, get things kind of automated. And then when we have like a sort of uh, a market tantrum, or like the sort of
Mm.
Trump tariff tantrum, well, I don't look at my portfolio, for a few days. I kind of, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't, I try not to torture myself with, what's going on in the world and what's going on in my portfolio that I can't control. So it's always like,
Yeah.
let's bring things back to what's in my circle of control, what's out of my circle of control. Let's focus the energy and the headspace on the stuff that's in my control, and then the stuff that's exogenous and I can't do anything about. Let's just achieve, try and achieve some just Zen peace with that, because it'll be what it'll be.
That's so interesting, this balance between, tracking your spending. And then because that's something that you control, and then when
Yes.
it comes to money markets, IRAs, maybe reinvesting dividends, like that stuff, to just set it and forget it, right? So there are places where you can let go, and then places where you can assume responsibility. And I think just knowing where to put your attention can, both conserve your energy and help you to get traction to make forward progress. And we were talking about, automate where possible. In my younger days, back in the day when we used to write checks to pay bills,
Yeah.
like if I wasn't managing my money correctly, I would have such shame if I bounced checks, right? Because you bounce a check and then you have to pay that fee for bouncing it,
Mm.
and you pay a late fee to the creditor. And so you get like this double whammy. And for me, it was it used to send me into such a shame spiral. But then
Right.
once I put everything on automatic payment, then
Mm.
that didn't happen. I didn't
Mm.
forget to send in a bill, or didn't forget, you know what I mean? I was able to, so it was reducing the amount of shame I was incurring,
Yeah.
and it helped me to manage my energy around it. And it's funny that you mentioned the 3 month tracking your spending daily. I started doing that not that long ago. I would say over, maybe it was in August, where I started tracking my spending daily. And I began to see, both personal and in business. Like in business, I would sign up for these software subscriptions that would help me manage
Mm.
my business.
Mm.
That, when you sign up for those things, it's exciting. You think, oh, this is going to help me. Then you realize, oh, I don't really use this. But then you forget about it. If you're not tracking, it's like, oh my God, I'm spending all these monthly memberships or whatever, like all the soft. Oh my gosh, like that was a huge, just by paying attention, I saved myself so much money.
So here's a horror story. I went to Florida like 3 years ago, and there was something that you could get in America, some supplement that you could get in America, but not the UK. So I signed up for Amazon Prime in the USA so
Oh
that they would
no.
deliver it. And 3 years later, I'm like, I've just been paying 3 years of subscription for Amazon in a country that I don't even live in,
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
because I just forgot to cancel it.
yeah, that's painful. Oh my gosh, yeah. Or like, I'm a podcast host, and there are some software tools that you can use. I didn't know that accidentally, like I signed up for a trial for something and forgot to put it on my calendar to cancel it. And it
Mm,
charged me the annual fee
yeah.
for it. So it was like a few $100s, but I was like, oh my gosh. And anyway, sometimes you can get your money back, sometimes you can't. But anyway, tracking is so important.
And so, like, one of my big principles is for most of my clients, they tend to be kind of like pretty busy successful people, sometimes they've got usually they've got family. And so if you've got like a partner, you've got a family, you've got a business, or you've got a high powered job, like anything like that, by far your scarcest resource is headspace. You know,
Hmm.
headspace is the sort of the scarcest resource for like busy people. And so
Decision fatigue and
decision fatigue. So for those people, like the reward for just getting your setup right. So in terms of, what can you control? You can control the work you do, the hours you work. You can control, like you can put your basic bills on direct debit. You can choose your asset allocation. You can choose like how much you're going to save every month. And then you can just let the plan kind of run in the background.
yeah,
And that is the least consumptive of headspace kind of way to go.
yeah,
And a lot of the financial services industry is kind of a scam because it's all just kind of shiny object thing, saying we've got a magic wand, we've got a magic wand, we've got a magic product, we've got a magic product. Sign up to our magic product, and most of it is like BS. A lot of it is just high cost, high fee
mm,
BS. And
hmm,
so by just keeping it simple, like low cost products, low cost, equity tracker fund, a cash emergency fund, you know, have a house that you pay off. You can just make asset allocation and your financial setup pretty simple, and then you're just focusing on, you know, killing it in your business, like kind of um, putting your energy where it has the highest kind of ROI.
yeah. So it sounds like when someone comes to you for support around this, you kind of do a little triage, you give them some tools, and sort of set up a plan so that it's something that's monitored annually, or but it's like I think what people kind of freak out about is like it just seems like a big project. It's overwhelming, so it's easy to put off. But what I'm hearing is that with a little bit of courage and a little bit of support, you can kind of break it down into consumable steps and manage both the emotional, physical part, and then set up strategies that you are not going to take a lot of mental bandwidth. Is that fair?
That's exactly right. And I mean, I often when people come to me, they're like, "Oh, this is going to be painful. It's going to take a
Yeah.
load of time. I currently have an accountant and a lawyer and a financial advisor, and how could I live without them?" And I'm like, it really doesn't have to be that
Yeah.
complicated. And I, because I've just seen it done many, many times before, I know it's and it's not that hard to just sort it out, get your system up and running, manage your own portfolio, kind of fire the expensive wealth manager, do it yourself, put it on autopilot, and like the compounding effect is wild. So if you start with $15,000 when you're 25, and it's in the S&P 500 for you know between 25 and 65, $15,000 compounds into $1 million at 10% per annum. But if you pay a wealth manager 2% a year, you don't get 10% per annum, which is the stock market return, which has been the stock market return. You get 10 minus 2%, you get 8%, and your $15,000 only does not grow to $1 million. It grows to $457,000, which
Oh
is
my
which is a
God.
which is good, but you've lost half of your pot to the fees.
Wow, that's intense. Yeah, so I'm hearing that it's actually not as painful as you're afraid it's going to be, and it's not as time consuming or going to take the mental bandwidth that you're afraid it's going to take.
Yeah.
I think that's
So,
really
so,
important.
so,
Yeah.
so, and I kind of put my money where my mouth is, in the sense that my coaching model, I just say, okay, when you're signed up, it's unlimited time because I kind of know that it's not going to take as
Mm.
much time as often they think it's going to take. And so I'm like,
Oh,
if we'll spend as much time as you need. We'll spend as much
yeah.
time as you need because I kind of know it's not that hard.
So you're sort of removing the risk by allowing
Some of
as
it,
much time. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. Listen, this is a lot to chew on. I feel like we could probably do a whole series around this because I feel like there is a lot of, mental reframing around, for people like me, it's like security that came from insecurity in childhood, but
Mm,
also
mm,
like separating like your self-worth
mm.
and things like that. So maybe we'll save that for round two. But where can people have more questions for you? Where can they find you?
So I've got a website called The Escape Artist. So it's www dot the escape artist, all one word, dot me, not dot com, theescapeartist dot me.
About me.
And from there you can find I've got a Substack as well.
Oh,
So I kind of write a weekly blog. On Substack, and then sometimes that goes on the main website. So yeah, that's escapeartist.me is where to find me. And yeah, I'd love to come back and talk more, do round two
yeah.
about more 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 anti-anxiety tips. Because like you I kind of think for people that have it bad, you kind of have to attack it from kind of every angle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, tactical, practical, emotional, mental,
Yeah.
physical. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so if you're driving and listening to this, I'm going to leave all the links in the show notes. And Mary, thank you so much for your time today. That was really helpful for someone like me that has anxiety around money. Yeah, anxiety around money for no good reason. That was super helpful, and I just really appreciate all your wisdom today.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do. It's appreciated.